Good morning.
Done.
We'll call together the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Legislative Advocacy Committee. Today is Monday, July 28th, 2025, 9 p.m. Of course, this is a virtual only meeting. So we'll do a roll call, please.
Director Paul?
Here.
Director Riley?
Here.
Chair Oglesby?
Here.
We have a quorum of 3 members.
Thank you so much. Next, we go to items of public comment. Any members wishing to address this committee may do so at this time. Public comment is open. Before we get to that, did we have any, Dave, do we have any changes to the agenda or any corrections?
No, we don't. We have an addition of a PowerPoint that doesn't affect the agenda.
Okay. And the public has access to it and they'll see it right now. So, okay. No problems at all. We'll go back. Public comment is open.
Chair Oglesby, we do not have any members of the public in attendance.
Okay, thank you. We'll just keep it open for another 30, 40 seconds. Public comment remains open. All right, thank you. Hearing no one, seeing no one, public comment is closed. We'll go to item number 1 is the consider adoption of our last committee meetings of March 20th, 2025. What is the will of the body?
I move approval.
Second.
Thank you. It's been probably moved in second. Is there any?
No, we have no public in attendance.
Thank you so much. Public comment is closed. All those in favor, use the regular sign of voting, which is aye.
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 Nays have the same right. Abstentions, hearing none, ayes have it, motion carried. We go next to item number 2, report from the Ferguson Group on federal legislative and regulatory activities.
Yes, so there was a federal ledge tracker in the packet, but Roger Gwynn and the 2 Chris's are here with us today, so I'll turn it over to Roger.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dave and committee members. Let me see if you can see this, and I will see if I can get this to show. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is it, hopefully it's showing in the, there we go, screen mode. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And Chris Kearney is going to start us off and give you an overview of sort of what the landscape is here in DC, give you an update on reconciliation and then we'll cover appropriations and kind of the other things that are going on and again, touch on the ledge tracker, which you had in your packet from the beginning. Chris, start.
Thanks, and good morning, everyone. It is great to be with you. We are coming out of a nasty classic, why they call it the swamp here in Washington from a weather standpoint, as opposed to any other reason. So it's been ugly. So it's great to put myself mentally where you are, if nothing else. So a couple of things to set the table briefly, that some of which you've kind of gathered from reading in the papers, but it's important context for kind of a little bit of where we've been and where we're going. From the outset, the administration, and I want to talk just briefly about the executive branch sort of setting, because I think it's important. From the outset, as you know, from press reports, the administration came in and did a whole lot of things very differently, and they had the Doge effort and a lot of those other things. And that really set the tone for some disruption and chaos and confusion from an executive branch standpoint, and it sort of permeated kind of Washington in general and Congress in general. And so, as we'll talk a little bit about when we get to water policy, we're just now really starting to come into focus both legislatively and from an executive standpoint. In general, usually the level of chaos that you read about, there was a reduced version of that, and it was usually over by February. And in many respects, we're just kind of getting started and getting our feet under us, both on the executive branch end of things and the legislative end of things, here in July, which is, and even that, I think it'll take the rest of this year. So we are starting to stabilize. Things are starting to get under our feet a bit. And so I think there's going to be a lot sort of substantively to talk about in a hurry, but it has been a chaotic and disruptive situation from the executive branch, freezing grants, delays in personnel. They've got 144 nominees for the Trump administration and their pipeline pending to be confirmed, for example. There's issues with Water Bureau Reclamation Commissioner that we'll talk about in a second that's having some impact on some of the operations. But in terms of that sort of disruption and uncertainty, as if that wasn't enough, Congress has functioned, particularly in the House and in the Senate, less so, but in the House, with razor-thin margins that led Speaker Johnson to really develop this notion of one big, beautiful bill, the idea that we really were only, you had incredibly tight margins. You could lose maybe 2-3 Republicans at the most, frankly, probably 2 as a practical matter. And so that gave rise to this idea, we're only going to get one shot at it. And so that was where the genesis of such a large piece of legislation came forward. A lot of debate, discussion about that. That margin that you see there on the screen was really from the outset had vacancies. Right at the moment, we have 4 vacancies, 1 Republican, Mr. Green, who resigned on July 20th to go into the private sector. Unfortunately, the other 3 vacancies are due to House Democratic members who all have passed away in recent months. I will say that all 3 seats are quite solidly in the hands of Democratic members. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. and then Reyes, Mr. Grijalva in Arizona, and Mr. Connolly here in my backyard in Northern Virginia. All of those seats will probably be filled by September. Both they have general special elections coming up, so they'll be at full pace by then. Tennessee, I'm less sure. I think it's about the same time frame. So you'll end up at a 220 to 215 margin for the balance of this Congress. That has proved incredibly challenging for Speaker Johnson. He has, frankly, in terms of the reconciliation bill, pulled off something that nobody really thought he could. I think I would be in that camp of folks who thought we'd still be talking about the big, big, beautiful bill. I didn't think 4th of July was feasible. I think in the Senate, they've done a masterful job there as well. But I think it's also fair to say that they have probably broken a lot of arms, made a lot of promises that we don't know, real and imagined, that while we will talk in a moment about some of the other legislative agenda items, of which there are plenty to be talking about, some of which will invariably get through. I think you will see members who came through and voted for the big, beautiful bill that under any other circumstance with any less at stake, including their own political futures, I think you'll start to see a different dynamic. So it's starting to stabilize, but that's kind of, I think that I go into a little bit of that detail because I think there's no question that there were a lot of promises made, a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of sort of broken china, that now that we're past solo the ultimate, I think you'll start to see a lot more free agents, if you will, and a lot more uncertainty as we go forward. Next slide, please. So we're just now really to that end. We've been so consumed with all things reconciliation that there really has been chatter about water. There's certainly, keeping the trains run on time at the department. The politicals there, there's only really 2 of them, Scott Cameron and Dustin Shearer, that are really making things, they're just kind of keeping their head above water. I talked to, Roger and I and Chris and others. We talk to those guys pretty regularly. They're taking meetings, they're engaged. There's definitely things moving forward, but there's a level of kind of just been a little bit of keeping the trains running on time right now. There's certainly these are some of the themes that are there. The thing I would add to this is I've had the occasion and I'm sure others have as well, to have some conversations with the folks at the department recently on water. And as you can imagine, next steps on the Colorado River actions are starting to come into focus. That's really where Scott Cameron's focus has been. They're starting hopefully to turn the corner on that. They've started now to talk publicly about very specific dates by which the basin states have to come to agreement, or else the secretary will step in as the water master. So that has really overshadowed everything. Scott was even threatening to hold up grant programs and grant allocations separate from DOJ if he thought there was grant money that could be leveraged to bring some folks to the table on this. One thing of note that we can talk about in a little bit that he did say that I think is relevant for us and for others is he said going forward in and trying to set a tone for not being in this same place that we're in, you know, with respect to the Colorado Rivers challenge and such, is he's going to try to infuse a different, broader approach to grant programs like WaterSmart and other grant-related programs through the prism of the following. One, what is my bang for the buck? How will these federal dollars through WaterSmart and others, what will be the yield in conservation and water saved? So he's really been colored by the Colorado River situation to the point where he wants to see, and he will end up, he's the acting assistant secretary for water and science, which oversees the Bureau of Reclamation. So he's in an important position. He won't be the only voice, but he will be an important voice going forward. And he has talked about the need for grant programs perhaps to take a bit more of a partnership regional approach, perhaps to have the what are we getting in terms of conservation long-term for these dollars rather than one-offs and so forth. And so in addition to what you see here, I think there's, at least at the moment, a thought among some of the more senior folks in the department about should we take a more kind of holistic and tangible approach to what these grant programs outcomes will be. I will say that an important thing about Scott, I worked with him in Bush 43, and he brings a very outcome-based, results-oriented approach because of his work at the department previously. So he's very much about outputs and such. So he is an important but not the only voice. So as the department turns to these issues in earnest, perhaps and the grants start to flow, you may start to see a bit of a shift in terms of some of the criteria that folks are looking for, to be determined, but something that's out there. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to where we are on the legislative status at this point. We finally got the one big beautiful bill through on the 4th of July. That has consumed all of the committees, including the water committees to this point. Everything was geared towards that. They would do a hearing there, a hearing there, but really, you know, you couldn't even get them to talk about a permitting reform or a water package or any of those things because they kept talking about reconciliation. The one thing for us of note that's in that package is $1 billion in funding to be available over the next 10 years for the department to spend on Bureau of Reclamation projects related to storage and water conveyance. Now, the conventional wisdom is that is, of course, Central Valley focused, and that was the driver, just like the money that was in the infrastructure bill for that version. Sorry about that. It'll stop in a second. But it is still free game money that could, you know, it's still fungible. It's still dollars that if it's in the department's total pot, while a portion of that may go towards Central Valley and other projects, it still frees up other money. The building, one quick example of that is the infrastructure bill. Has money in it for funding for some programs, and they offered less money proposed in the appropriations bills because the administration knew they had leftover money in the infrastructure bill for some accounts, but they know the appropriators are going to end up supplementing those accounts as well. So there's going to be a pot of money for rural water projects through the infrastructure bill, but there'll also be money on the appropriations bill. So we anticipate something similar. I think the main thing for us as we go forward, as they start to figure this out, is how does the appropriations process play out? It's a bit of a mess at the moment, as you might expect. We expect a CR again, and it's just going to be a race against time about how well they do in kind of cleaning up the wreckage from reconciliation. Hopefully the bipartisanship holds together in the appropriations process, but I think we're still looking at a CR, and we're still looking probably end of the year, maybe even into early this next year before we have the 26th process unraveled. The other thing that's quite hot these days is energy project and water project, for that matter. Permitting reform, how do you streamline the NEPA process? There was a lot of discussion during the Biden administration about the need to improve the NEPA process, and that is something that's carried forward into this Congress, and a host of other things we can chat about. But those are two that appropriations and sort of permitting reform are two that I'm aware of that folks are trying to play some catch up now that we've come out of the reconciliation process. And then final slide, please. And then one important something that we at the firm spent a lot of time on, I spent a lot of time on, was as they were putting together the tax piece of the reconciliation bill, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of concern about potential overhauling of the tools that local governments had at their disposal for financing of whether it's water projects or road projects or just a whole slew of things. Municipal bond financing, something critical to local governments. Fortunately, there was a recognition very, very early on, frankly, just not long after the election, that it could potentially be on the chopping block. There was an incredibly wide array of trade associations that came together, and individual entities that came together, including ones in California, to really make an aggressive case across the Congress for the need to preserve municipal bond financing, along with a couple of other tools that were beneficial. And happy to report that it did not appear, not even a modification or a haircut in either chamber. So it is a real testament, I think, to the grassroots support and the importance of the financing tool, as well as the folks, frankly, in and around Washington that were able to mobilize the forces that were necessary to see us dodge that bullet. So hopefully, having now not raised it this time or in the previous tax bill, that we'll live to fight another day for a foreseeable future. That's all I had on those.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Just turning now to a little bit more depth on the appropriations, FY26 federal appropriations process. As Chris said, that's the attention is now shifted fully there to that process and from reconciliation. And the House has reported out, of House Appropriations Committee has reported out its version of the Energy and Water Development Appropriations Bill. And this is the bill that principally provides funding for the Corps of Engineers, for the Bureau of Reclamation, and is really is the principal water funding subcommittee in the Congress on the House side. And so they have reported it out. They have included some extra unallocated funding for environmental infrastructure that'll be available, that the district will be able to compete for a fraction of those dollars when they go through, once the bill is approved and the Corps goes through what's called a work plan process, basically, that allows them to allocate the unallocated money by the Congress in terms of the individual projects. And again, you have a project, the Monterey Peninsula Stormwater Diversion and Recycling Project, which is a collection of small initiatives, about $750,000 request that can compete for these dollars. And so that's a positive sign. There'll be some discretionary dollars available for the Corps there. On the Senate side, we're kind of waiting action. Originally, it was planned that the Senate was going to be taking up the Energy and Water Bill. The Senate Appropriations Committee would take that up this week. The chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Kennedy of Louisiana, actually, and it's a fairly unusual move, announced that he was dissatisfied with the bill, would not go forward with the bill, and he was dissatisfied because it's got too much money in it. He thinks the allocation the subcommittee chair and ranking member have given them is in excess of what's really required. And so there's some disagreement there about the measure in terms of what will be allocated. So in any case, there's more to come there, and action, unless things get resolved in the next day or so, that bill will be punted over until September. Senate action on the same bill in energy and water. And the implications obviously are that it could result in some delays, and there could be a possible reduction. And typically we see as larger increments of funding for out of the Senate Energy and Water Subcommittee than the House. So this may not be the case going forward. And again, as I said, the district's priority is in this environment is the stormwater diversion and recycling project. And then again, this is Section 219. You may recall from past reports, this was there's an authorization that Representative Panetta, Senator Padilla requested on your behalf in the Water Resource Development Act of 2022, allocating and creating authorization for $20 million for the district and others in Monterey County to go after, but it was at the district's request. And the good news again on energy and water is that the again with the Senate not acting is that on the Senate side, the good news is that Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff both requested funding the $750,000 that the district had requested for this request in FY 2026. Other quick updates: Water Resource Development Act. In the past, the district has been advocating for some language that would basically allow the Corps of Engineers to provide assistance under that 219 authority in the form of reimbursements, just making it more efficient for the Corps to provide the assistance to the district and to others with similar authorities. And it also is more efficient for the Corps as well. And then this situation where, as Chris was talking about, the administration is all about pushing decision making down to the lowest level within these agencies, and that's definitely the case with the Corps of Engineers. So there are 40 districts within the Corps, and they're right now operating as little independent fiefdoms. And fortunately, Dave's worked very hard to create very positive relationships with, and the district has a very good relationship with the San Francisco district office, and that's certainly very fortunate for the district. But in any case, this would give them more flexibility and allow the Corps to provide assistance in a very efficient way. And that whole process is just kind of getting underway, and we expect the Water Resource Development Act to be enacted next year in 2026. In terms of other quick things, just of note, Department of Transportation, we're always out there looking for new ways to bring some additional dollars, opportunities to the district's attention that may be of help. And the Transportation Reauthorization Bill process, which was a foundation for the infrastructure package 5 years ago, is 4.5 years ago. So is in the process of being restarted, and they'll be acting on that next year. And there are a couple of potential opportunities for additional resources to be made available through Department of Transportation that could help water projects, basically. And so they have under consideration a couple of opportunities to provide prioritized projects, transportation projects that might support other investments of federal dollars in water supply reliability. And part of that also is emergency routes, egress routes, that kind of thing. So there, definitely some opportunities, some things to think about in terms of what might be, creating some additional opportunities that would benefit the district there. Also, culverts and wildlife crossings. They're talking about consolidating these two areas of funding and creating a larger pot of money that would be available for both. And this is the kind of funding that could be helpful for dealing with impediments to migrating steelhead and other, anadromous fish that the district is concerned about. There's also a process where it's a little unusual in the transportation reauthorization process for the administration to kind of try to engage in a very direct way in the authorizing process, but they have actually just last week they issued an RFI, request for information from the public at large about what should be in the transportation reauthorization bill that would be of interest to folks, and we'll be certainly following up with Dave on that and staff on that in terms of whether or not the district wants to weigh in on that, but there's an opportunity there. On water legislation, I'm going to actually kick it over to Chris, who's going to give you a little quick update of things that were included in your grants tracker. Chris.
Thanks, Roger.
Could we pause for a
Sure.
couple questions on what you've just covered before we go on? Do you mind?
No, that's fine.
Good.
Hold on a second. All right, George, do you have anything?
Oh, George, you're muted.
No, not yet.
Okay. So where are we pausing, and where do you want to go back to?
I had a question about the muni bonds and a question about culvert upgrades that might be of interest to the district. Just digesting the information. Muni bonds. I was wondering who are the main proponents of restricting local government access to muni bonds, and did they have much traction in Congress?
It's a great question. It's almost entirely ideologically driven by more conservative members of the House Republican Conference, the so-called Freedom Caucus members. Back in 2017, actually, there was something called advance refunding bonds. You may recall that was a financing tool that local governments had. Repeal of that was utilized as a cost-saving measure and kind of an offset for the broader tax cuts in 2017. And similarly, that spooked folks into being concerned that given the fact they really weren't paying attention and folks ideologically kind of they just were hunting for money and so-called pay fors and offsets. And in the House Ways and Means Committee, they actually kind of in the middle of the night, you were able to secure a repeal of ARBs before anybody kind of knew what happened. So it was against the backdrop of that history and that sort of being caught flat-footed that folks wanted to make absolutely certain that they didn't turn to muni bond financing as a much larger potential offset for the tax cuts in this package. And so it was really an effort to beat back folks who had a philosophical sort of difference of opinion about the federal government playing a role in tax policy with respect to local governments. And then secondly, perhaps just as pressing, the widely recognized concern on all fronts that if you were going to quote unquote have to pay for or find offsets for this large tax package, that nothing was safe and no stone would not be unturned. And fortunately, that was.
So do you think they may try again?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. I mean, not as a you mean as like a sort of a standalone measure to kind of go after them in vacuum? No, it would so I think we're fine in that sense.
But I think it
Okay,
will
thank
come
you.
up. I think it's fair to say, though, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think there will be another reconciliation package next year, and so we expect it to be or come up again in that context.
I think absolutely. I think it will be perpetually viewed by certain folks within the conference ideologically as in their sights, and it'll be a perpetual battle. I do think this is a very good sign for the future battle plan to keep that fight up. But yes, Roger, thank you for that. If we do have another reconciliation bill, I would expect it. There's certain folks that would still view it as a potential offset.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And this comes up every few years, maybe every 2 cycles, so maybe 8 years ago, and it's happened quite a bit. And the tax exemption is, it's thought to be about $35 to $40 billion of cost. So if you could only issue taxable bonds as a municipal, it would save the federal government, that 35 to 40 billion. So that's why it comes up all the time.
And to that point, David, one thing that happened this time around, because I was actually involved in this with some other folks, one thing that happened this time was an effort to sort of show what the loss to the government would be by virtue of the folks who would no longer have that deduction, as well as the cost to local government customers of water and energy and operations that would have to pass the costs along to their customers for the cost of financing. So brought into the discussion this time was the lost revenue from folks that don't get the tax deduction, as well as the pass-through cost of not having that tool at their disposal. So that's also out there now. And that was a good context in some cases against the backdrop of what folks thought would be the savings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, even back in 2016, when they did that Tax Cut and Jobs Act, they talked about capping the tax exemption. So that, anyway, I mean, we're going to need muni bonds for the takeover of Cal-Am, on the order of 400 to 500 million. So for us, that's one of the advantages of publicly owned utilities over privately owned utilities in terms of capital financing costs. So, we would absolutely work to fight any repeal of the tax exempt financing.
Exactly. Very important for us. One quick question about culvert upgrades, and this maybe is a question for Dave or Mike. I don't even know what a culvert is, to be honest. So can you just tell me quickly what's an example of an upgrade to a culvert that we might want to get funding for?
Yeah, well, it's and actually Highway 68, they just announced a whole culvert upgrade program here in Monterey County. It's the storm drains under the roadways.
Okay.
But the other really interesting thing of that bill is the wildlife crossing. And I don't think it's doable, but if you remember the whole restoration of Rancho Cañada Golf Course was now from like Jack's Peak all the way down to Carmel Valley Road and then up through Palo Corona. They keep talking about wildlife migration areas. And what would be very interesting would be a flyway or a wildlife passageway over Carmel Valley Road, connecting kind of that Hatton Canyon area to Palo Corona. So we'll refer that one over to the Regional Parks District, just like we will refer over some of the water legislation that's stuck in the transportation bills for like the Carmel River Free Culvert project, you know, the flyway. So we may not be able to access some of these, but some of our brother and sister agencies might find some use.
Good, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay,
Chris?
thank you. Please continue.
Great. It's good to meet with you all. I'm going to give a quick snapshot of some of the bills and legislation that we've been tracking, and we'll start off with just 5 of the bills. The first is the Fish Act. That's Rep. Calvert's bill. It should be familiar to us all. It was on the track last year, last go around, last Congress, and this is a simplification of how the Endangered Species Act is managed and regulated. The goal is to combine the management and regulation for anadromous fish underneath the Fish and Wildlife Service. The split is between the National Marine Fisheries Service and Fish and Wildlife, and brings about the concerns of application of the ESA underneath the 2 different services and the challenges that come with that. Next, we have Senator Shaheen's Assistance for Rural Water Systems Act. This bill would provide improvements and repairs to critical water infrastructure and address some clean drinking water and wastewater treatment service concerns. In doing so, it provides a grant through the USDA and it gives additional authorities to low interest and 0 interest loans, as well as different mechanisms for loan forgiveness and refinancing for repairing, modernizing, and renovating different infrastructure pieces. The next 2 bills are kind of joint. It's a bipartisan approach by Rep. Valadeo and Rep. Costa in California, and that's the Every Drop Counts Act, as well as the Groundwater Technical Assistance Act. These 2 bills focus, one, the Every Drop Counts would make modifications to small storage programs and increase the overall cap and size for groundwater recharge processes. And the Groundwater Technical Assistance Act would provide funding to an authorization that came from BIL, allowing for the Bureau of Reclamation to provide technical assistance to groundwater recharge projects. Of note for the district's purposes, that includes aquifer storage and recovery projects. And next and final, we have the Water Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act. Congressman Huffman introduced this bill, and it would amend the federal law to exempt homeowners from paying income tax on rebates received for and from water utilities. And as a wrap up on the next slide, we have just kind of a recap. Obviously, we covered and kind of went back to the bond tax treatment, municipal bond, safe for now, but obviously something to continue to watch. Appropriations, next step there is to see how both chambers continue to move forward. The Senate Energy and Water markup is delayed, as Roger mentioned, but early September, we expect them to return back to that bill. All roads point to a CR, but Congress is moving slightly different in this go round with respect to appropriations, and both sides seem eager to ensure that something's done as far as that's concerned. And then WRDA, as we covered, good start early and still traction to be made through the appropriations bills, but support from the senators and those bills. And obviously there's opportunity to engage in the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act. That'll be an ongoing process over the next couple of months and into next year, and a great way for the district to weigh in there. As we go to the next slide, any questions if we want to check back in on any items?
No, I want to interject a couple of things. So Chris just mentioned the term CR, which is continuing resolution. The last continuing resolution dropped all the earmarks out. So we've got, as Roger mentioned earlier, a $750,000 Section 219 environmental infrastructure earmark that both Senators Schiff and Padilla put forward for us. So we run the risk of losing that if it goes to a CR in whenever, September, October. Chris also highlighted 5 bills, the 3 that we find most interesting or important. The Fish Act would move the National Marine Fisheries Service out of our domain and put it into U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which we don't know what that would do to our the personnel that currently regulates and participates in our quarterly water budget meetings from National Marine Fisheries Service. So we're eyeing that one with interest. The cost of groundwater bill might have some impact on the Seaside Groundwater Basin, both aquifer storage and recovery, protect water levels. So we're following that one. And then we're hopeful that Jared Huffman is successful finally. He's had this rebate, trying to equalize it with the energy rebates, which are not subject to taxation. And, you know, we've got pretty large rebates for the high efficiency closed washers. And, you know, it's always frustrating to, what is it, W9? I think we W9 those. And our customers are like, what's this for? It's like, well, you know, technically it's income that you'll have to declare, and it frustrates a lot of the customers. So it'd be a nice little piece of cleanup for us to not have to deal with that. I also want to point out that Mike gave Senator Schiff's aide, Edwin Sevilla, is that Mike? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
A tour of the Pure Water Monterey project about a month ago, little more than a month ago. So we're keeping busy there. We did file at the request of the Army Corps of Engineers a certificate of financial capability or capacity about 2 weeks ago. So we're keeping all of our relationships going, even though we kind of have this expectation that the earmark will get killed, and you know, we'll start again next year. But we appreciate the Ferguson Group's help.
Dave, the one thing I might mention to you, and it's anecdotal, but one of the most conservative blocks of Republicans in the House is known as the House Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
Their chairman, Andy Harris, was quoted as saying, we should do a CR for the year with earmarks as a simplified way to deal with this strategy. Now, does that hold? Does that carry water? Who knows? But it's an interesting, it's a little interesting crack in the public dam. We'll see.
Well, and as we've talked about with you guys, at a minimum, just getting an agreement in place with the Corps, you know, spending that first nominal dollars to get an agreement in place would be a good step. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Before we move on, are there any questions for the Ferguson Group and the federal legislative update?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
The public press doesn't forget that Trump has an animus against California in general. Do you see this filtering down through the Senate and the House actions, whatever they're dealing with, or are they pretty much dealing with the subject matter somewhat more legitimately than what Trump is?
Want to try that, Roger?
Yeah, I unfortunately had missed the first part. So Chris, could you
Yeah, I think
It
the
was an
question.
internet issue, I think, on my end. I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
think the question basically is Donald Trump, through his various executive actions and public statements, has been but a high degree of animus towards California. How
Right.
might that play out through the Congress? Is the Congress going to be? Are there elements of the Congress that will be similarly situated and be supportive and responsive in helping him doing that?
Yeah, there certainly will be elements. I'll say, I mean, there are, members of the delegation, obviously Republican members of the delegation that are, interested in and supportive of the Congress and the administration taking steps to penalize any way they can, the governor, and so it sort of translates that way, and we see that in terms of lack of federal support for things like high-speed rail and issues like that. They're looking at other other priorities of the administration, but at the same time, in the water area, we are seeing a lot of cooperation at the sort of agency level between Department of Water Resources, California Natural Resources Agency, and the federal agency. So they actually are playing well together in a lot of areas, so it is interesting. I mean, we certainly don't. There's no evidence of the California delegation as a whole being penalized, and I'll say on the Democrat or Republican side, but Democratic side, where you might think it might appear, things are moving forward in terms of appropriations, earmarks, and things of that sort. Things are moving forward in a fairly balanced way in that regard. I'm sure Mr. Padilla, Mr. Schiff are not exactly happy, with kind of some of the allocations they're getting, because some of them are a little small on some of the subcommittees, but they're not being ignored entirely. And there's a good bit of work. The thing is on the Senate, the last thing on this is that Senate side, every bill except for rescissions and reconciliation requires 60 votes. And so the Democrats are, the Republicans, the majority has to engage with the Democrats at some level there. And we still, and again, the natural resources space are seeing a lot of interest in things like streamlining of permits and things of that sort, modeled after things like the forest and forest management bills that went through in past Congresses. So there's interest in doing things on a bipartisan basis there as well. So I don't know if that helps, Chris, or
Yeah, the only other thing I
Chris,
would add to that is Trump knows where California is and understands things like water and agriculture by virtue of the kinds of Central Valley California Republicans who have educated him. So I think that helps to mitigate, when the folks at Interior and Reclamation talk about the need to do things on water and infrastructure, and California comes into that. I think that helps as opposed to, New York or something. I would say that Senator Schiff probably occupies a particularly special high level of animus for President Trump. So certainly Senator Padilla, who works very hard behind the scenes, quite frankly, quite seriously, Senator Padilla works very hard and his staff are first rate at fostering bipartisan relationships behind the scenes, and they've done that both when Mr. Biden was in the White House and with Trump in the White House. And so I certainly know, I think collectively on the call know firsthand. Certainly, as Senator Schiff just got there, but I think there's a bit of a dichotomy there, both in terms of their seniority, a bit of the politics with respect to that. So I think that's I don't think it would. I could envision a circumstance where Senator Padilla's staff, I might encourage them to call it somebody at an agency. I would never encourage somebody from Senator Schiff's staff or Senator Schiff, at least not for the foreseeable future, to do that. So there's a little bit of those kinds of things, but I would echo what Roger said. I think there's a lot of, when you're down to actually the business of government, there's a lot of work that has to get done that the rhetoric sort of tends to stay kind of receded.
There must still be some people in those government agencies trying to do as much good as they can get away with. Is the way I used to think about it when I worked in government.
Oh yeah, no question about that. No question about that. And that was the case before all this unfortunate nonsense and that generalized folks, for sure.
One last thing on the federal front, Roger, Chris, and Chris. We have Liz Jacobson, Panetta's legislative aide, who you know, coming out here from Washington the week of August 18th. So Mike has been in contact with her, and I think we're going to try to hook her up with a tour of our fish rearing facility, because it'll be in action at that time, and it's kind of a feel-good story. So
I think, and Mr. Panetta, who's on the Ways and Means Committee, has a good relationship with Jason Smith, the chairman. I've seen them out around town dining at restaurants. They're about the same age. So he's one in particular who I think is, quietly working to foster those relationships behind the scenes for sure.
I have one more simple question. I think HR 2766. It's to recognize special districts as an entity for consideration, similar to cities and counties and that kind of thing. And we're really interested in that, but I didn't see a report on it, and I just didn't know whether there was an update at all.
Yeah, happy to include that going forward. I think there's a large push for that recognition. Special districts are often included in the naming of NOFOs and grant opportunities, and that's something that folks have worked to rectify. So we can absolutely include that going forward. And I don't believe there's any traction. I know that they have a Senate and House sponsor, and that was a big step in the 118th Congress. Now it's as Dave mentioned, a lot of these bills are continually reintroduced by members and with the advocacy of constituents, and this is something that is in the early stages, but certainly can gain traction pretty quickly. So we can add that and track that as well.
Yeah, I think there was a bill maybe 4 years ago that we signed on a coalition letter with the CSDA, the California Special Districts Association. So we would do so again if asked.
Yep.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
definitely, and prioritize that. And that's a bill that's got bipartisan support. Mr. Panetta is not listed officially as a co-sponsor of that right now, but it's certainly, I know, one that he would take a serious look at and be interested in, I'm sure. So, and it's obviously in California, with the large number of special districts that we have in the state, it'd be a big benefit.
Yeah.
One more question through the chair. On the Fish Act, is that, the summary says to amend the Endangered Species Act. Is this an attempt to sort of a backdoor repeal or restriction of the endangered?
Yeah. What the intent is to consolidate all regulatory decisions associated with anadromous fish or covered species. The National Marine Fisheries Service has responsibility for over in Fish and Wildlife Service. The sense is that in a lot of situations you'll have conflicts between land-based species, other endangered species, waterfowl, shorebirds, whatever it might be, and anadromous fish. And so the thought is that putting the regulatory responsibility in one spot is going to allow a balanced approach, and that would be helpful to folks. So it is certainly the case that with the way it's currently structured, National Marine Fisheries Service is focused solely on the species it has responsibility for, and does not take into consideration, as much, the concerns of its sister agency, Fish and Wildlife Service, and so we do have, they have issues that often where they come into conflict and they have to be resolved. And the thought is that, again, it would be helpful from just a streamlining perspective.
And this is a vestige of the early 70s when the National Environmental Policy Act was passed and the Clean Water Act, all like 1972-ish under Nixon. So National Marine Fisheries Service is under NOAA, and NOAA is in the Department of Commerce. U.S. Fish and Wildlife is under the Bureau of Reclamation, which is the Department of Interior. And so that compromise was made back then to get a lot of this environmental regulation moving forward. But so the Endangered Species Act enforcement sits over there with NOAA, yet the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is over there in the Bureau, and so it would kind of rectify that division.
I see.
And the
Thank you.
main opposition to this moving these regulatory responsibilities is actually, come from the commercial fishermen on the East Coast, on the Atlantic, who are more concerned about the limited limits on harvesting of species in the ocean. And one of the things that's changed is they've separating that out. Magnuson Act would stay with Commerce in terms of responsibility for dealing with harvest rates and that kind of thing in the ocean, and then the regulatory responsibility for managing the species outside of the Magnuson Act would be transferred to Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's kind of one of the changes that's happened to try to thread that needle there.
And one of the things that's interesting that this bill has been introduced perpetually in recent years, and it was always somewhat dismissed, not dismissed, but just the challenge of physically moving one agency out of a department into another. And there's a lot to that. And the bill doesn't address a lot of those issues. It will be interesting to see how much of this bill, either administratively or in fact statutorily, the administration takes a hard look at, because this is exactly the sort of thing that sort of DOJ and the administration are looking to do, because think of the office space that would be freed up if you consolidated the two agencies and some other things that they may be thinking about. So while the bill is somewhat limited in how it leaves a tremendous number of things to be answered that have to be dealt with administratively and cost issues and so forth, we broke down a lot of those norms and sort of barriers, and there's actually some more things in place for the tools to perhaps make this happen. So I think it's one we're going to want to watch closely, because the sort of reasons it hasn't gained traction before, I mean, the politics in the Senate and Democratic opposition probably will still ultimately be what thwarts it, but the concept behind it has far more traction and has been tested far more in the first 7 months of this administration than perhaps has been done previously.
Thank you. It's helpful.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
If there's no further questions, we'll move on. Or any comments, Dave? Do you have any highlight anything you want this committee to get out of the federal legislation?
No, we've tapped all of it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item number 3, report from JENA and Associates on legislative status and bill tracking at the state level, I would imagine.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chair and committee members. This is actually a very good opportunity to give you an update on what's going on here in California, as you had also at the federal level, since the California legislature has gone on recess now as of a week ago, and will be out until about mid-August before they come back for the final sprint to finish up legislation in the other house that they just came over from, if they're still alive, and then the last 2 weeks of dealing floor session before they shut down in mid-September for the remainder of the year. So we, having said that, you have our written report in that an overview of the budget that was recently passed, and Lori's going to cover that and cover some of the legislative issues. I'll talk a little bit about I'll add a little bit to the tour and the work we've been doing with our state legislators, and then go back to some specific legislative items and work that's been done on the cease and desist order. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lori.
Good morning, members. So as John said, the legislature, they are on break. They met their second House policy deadline, which was the 18th. And in the midst of all these policy committees, we had to pass a budget. Unlike previous years, this is not, it wasn't a big budget in terms of details. And this is for several reasons. They did pass a $321 billion budget. Basically, this is right now a placeholder. in the space of a lot of the uncertainties, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, as far as getting some FEMA relief for the LA fires. And then those affected by the LA fires do not have to file their taxes until October 16th. And so those Southern California personal income tax revenues are some of our largest. So it really leaves a gap of how much money we are dealing with. We do anticipate coming back in November and then another time in January to do another budget. For those who've been around, this is kind of reminiscent of the Schwarzenegger years, where we are just dealing with a lot of uncertainties. The biggest one is coming out of the big beautiful bill is the draconian cuts to Medicaid. California is estimating about 2.6 million people will fall off the rolls of that and trying to backfill those impacts. On a somewhat of a high note, the LAO and the Department of Finance came out at the end of June that our revenue projections are 2.7 billion higher than anticipated. 1.4 billion is coming from the federal government in delayed disaster relief, and another 1.4 billion in personal income revenue. So again, it's very, very uncertain in the water world of budget. As I said in my report, not a lot. They are relying on the Prop 4 dollars, but that has not come out yet. We are anticipating when they do come back, August 18th, that there is going to be a flurry of trailer bill language that they are negotiating right now, on what to do. And what, Roger was saying about the cooperation between the state and the Trump administration on water, where it's really heavy is on the Delta Conveyance Project. And we've spoken about this in prior years. This has been a priority for the previous governor, Jerry Brown, and looks like Newsom has picked up the mantle. And this is basically a $40 billion project that will run pipelines through, basically taking water from the north down to the south. And of course, this was exacerbated by the LA fires and the contention that there was not enough water, which was untrue. So we're going to see this come up again. This is a huge issue. The legislature does not have an appetite for this. They see it as high-speed rail junior, that we are going to dig ourselves into, a financial and environmental quagmire. There is a tremendous amount of opposition, and they don't have the votes. The governor has tried to force this through in previous years through the budget process, and like those previous years, he was unsuccessful. However, where he was successful is around CEQA. So I'll go back in late March, responding to the legislature, kind of responding to the lack of a development of housing and a lot of what they considered the barriers and burdens and regulatory hardships of moving more inventory of housing, introduced a package of 22 bills. And all these 22 bills together basically blocked all CEQA interference on infill housing, high transient housing, of trying to take this long-standing environmental rule out of the equation. As you can imagine, there were both sides of the aisle kind of riled up against this. About a month later, Speaker Rivas came out in support of the package. And while some of these bills are still moving, what the governor did, and he made it contingent on him signing the budget, was SB 131. And so this is a very, very significant and big trailer bill for California. It essentially suspends CEQA and streamlines the environmental review for a majority of the housing projects. Infrastructure and water is included in their healthcare facilities, and of course wildfire mitigation projects. despite huge opposition on the bill, it passed with flying colors. So we are now going to be living in a very different world where CEQA has absolutely been, it's not dead, but it has been dramatically weakened. And that includes a lot of fish and wildlife takes and everything, where the environmental side of growth is really kind of moving by the wayside. And this is, essentially kind of the legislature responding to the last election of seeing where California wants to go. And obviously, without saying the quiet part out loud, we kind of know where Governor Newsom wants to go. So this is continuing development of what is going to be going on as far as the more global priority issues for California. We will keep more in touch in the next upcoming month, 6 weeks before they do adjourn on what they are planning to do around water. As I said, they still may try the Delta Conveyance Plan, and then of course they'll work on the regional water control plans. So that's on budget. Are there any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
Why 22 different bills on CEQA reform instead of just one?
Because CEQA is, well, there's a number of reasons. CEQA is think of an overall encompassing that it's not like CEQA just affects housing here. It affects all different types of housing, whether they are ADUs, they are additions to your house, whether they are for multifamily. And so, CEQA is the law, the rule of the land. So they have to, rather than doing this one comprehensive bill, which is probably easier to kill and water down, they go on 22 different bills to address 22 different issues that CEQA is affecting housing. And also, you have 22 egos that wants to be a part of this. And everyone wants to play in the playground. And it also, optically, it looks strong. Rather having 22 different bills with 22 different authors than one bill with 22 co-authors. So it was very well played. They did do a big press release, and it's showing the seriousness of the legislature of CEQA has had a good run. And the environment, while it's still very important to California, we are seeing where it is hindering our growth and our potential, especially in around our housing capabilities. So it's a myriad of things.
Yes, let's get the picture. But it's, I'm just thinking of, for people having to apply CEQA after all these reforms, how, it may be, when you do it that way, patchwork, lots of separate reforms to one overall statute, you can end up with contradictions and inconsistencies and things that are difficult to interpret.
Absolutely. And so that's the significance why I really wanted to highlight the SB 131 trailer bill, because that trailer bill encapsulated really the core of what those 22 bills were trying to accomplish. Some of the bills are not of the 22 will not be moving for any further because it was taken care of in the trailer bill. So there are some little extra bills that are kind of loosening ends, but for the most part, the huge policy push that is centralized is in that trailer bill.
I see.
So, because yes, when you start having a lot of bills picking and choosing and all that stuff, you get a convoluted, especially when you're dealing with multi-agencies, you get kind of like a convoluted policy and lack of direction.
Yeah.
I have
on a trailer bill. What's the timing on a trailer bill?
it was passed. The governor would not sign the budget until the legislature passed the trailer bill, so it was passed on June 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
So attached, I have your ledge track, and as John said, we will have down the road a little bit conversation about a particular bill, but I do want to draw your attention to a bill. It's on the last page, I believe. It is SB 707 by Senator Durazo. It is pertaining to open meetings.
Uh,
Okay, so we're going to go back a little bit in time to the fun days of COVID. So when we had COVID, the legislature passed a number of these open meeting bills to allow agencies and boards and councils and supervisors to have meetings kind of like how we are having now. And having remote access and allow them to do so as well. So all of these bills will be expiring in January. So in previous years, there really wasn't an appetite for the legislature to tackle open meetings. However, because we have seven laws that are expiring, they got on it. So there were a number of bills introduced. And then we have SB 707. And Senator Rosser, keep in mind, she is chair of Senate Local Government. And when she introduced this bill, to say was problematic was an understatement. She tried to take, kind of like the trailer bill, everything encapsulated and all the issues around open meetings and put it into one bill and kind of, trying to tool it and make it work. Everyone was up and roar. However, we worked closely with the California Special District Association and then also our ongoing relationship with CSAC, the State Association of Counties, and of course the League of Cities. And the sentiment is one, she wanted to work with the local governments and the local agencies, and that this would be a work in progress, and let's have one, I hate to use this, big, beautiful bill dealing with open meetings that will take care of everything. And so what we kind of a certain issue, and I'm sure you know about it, and I reached out to Dave and said, hey, you may want to take a look at it. This affects Monterey more than any other, of the 56 counties. When I say Monterey and I say 56, is because it's Tulare. And it's called the 20% rule, is that the county of Monterey has a limited English proficient population that represents over 20% of the population. It's actually 24.5%, which is a Spanish and Tagalog speakers. So because you are above 24.5, you have more requirements when it comes to voter access and as well as open meetings, as far as translation services, agendas, postings, everything in multiple language. Tulare is the other county. So you have these two counties, Monterey, of saying, okay, this bill is problematic at best. And then you add on the fact that for Monterey, it would be even more so. And so again, working with the Special Districts Association and the counties in the league, where we are right now is no one has taken a position on it. We were asked not to take a position, that we are going to be in a cooperative mindset with this author. So there have been a ton of new amendments, and essentially where they got it is what we have to do currently. So, and she accepted a large amount of the CSDA's and the county's amendments. So in terms of translation and interpretive services, that you can use digital translation tools, which we, under the rule we can now. You can translate the agenda only, which for Monterey we can now, and you don't have to use a certified translator. So they're adding some flexibility. There's still some outstanding issues on this bill, like language around the disruption of meetings. I think we all remember, the basically people coming in and Zoom bombing city council meetings and supervisor meetings and whatnot. So we're still working on the language. The ACLU is not a fan of the language that we are throwing out right now. And there's also an issue around multi-jurisdictional bodies. But where we started over here and where we're ending up, we are in a far better place. And I like bills like this where it's, multi associations and stakeholders and really kind of moving this together. So, just showing the cooperation that we do have with the other statewide associations, and that this not only affects this body, but all the other bodies that you do sit on in the county. So I just wanted to highlight that particular bill. So if there are any questions.
Any remaining questions?
Yeah, a couple from me. Well, as far as that one, so what are the chances of it passing and including the provision requiring translation? And should we start to get ready to provide translation services for our meetings?
The odds of it passing are great. I doubt it will be a 2-year bill. They are trying to get this done before the end of the year, before all these, the other statutes regarding open meetings that they do sunset. My understanding is because that you are a 20% rural county, that this was already like for some like the city councils and the supervisors, that you do have to provide, that they do already do that.
Mm-hmm. And special districts, will the same requirements apply to special districts?
We are still working on that.
Oh, okay.
We are trying to get out of that. So,
Okay.
and I've been working with Marcus Detweiler from CSDA, and who's wonderful, and there is headway on that. So, again, I've kept Dave abreast of everything and we've been asked, and as well as, CSAC is telling their counties, and the league is telling, and there are some that will just take some positions, of just basically, we are still in active negotiations. Let's not pull the trigger yet. If it comes out and we don't like it, then we kill it. So that's where we're at. So this is kind of
Okay.
one of those very active bills.
Okay, okay. I also have a question about one other bill, the one that would require agencies to meet and confer with the unions if concerning contracting for services. And we do a lot of the services we need, we obtain on a contract basis, not
Okay, so
in-house. Yeah.
339.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry, don't remember the number. Yeah.
Yes,
Well, right,
339, yes.
yeah, right when you said that, I'm like, yeah, we call this bad bills, the woofer bills. Yeah, this is a very, very problematic bill. A lot of the local agencies are opposed. The statewide associations are opposed. It's basically a fight right now between labor and local government. And in these situations, and if you look at and I can send you the analysis, it's one of those bills where the statewides are going to go fight, and it's not usually broken down with individual counties, individual cities, individual districts. That this is really kind of like a fight at the statewide level, and we've been again working with the counties as well as CSDA of, they're hammering this bill. So this is going to come, unfortunately, we believe that this is going to come down to a veto, hopefully.
Uh-huh. Complicated issue. All right.
It is a
That's
very complicated.
Yeah. Because I mean, I can imagine some situations where the unions have a legitimate concern about contracting out. But a situation like ours, a lot of the services we contract for are highly specialized, and they don't need it on a continuing basis. You need it like a project by project. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we use contracting so much.
Exactly. I mean, that you could see the arguments on both sides, and unfortunately, this bill is going overarching on it. From my conversations with the stakeholders, is that there are negotiations going on of really kind of, trying not to go so overarching and broad. and try, we all understand the issue, but try to get at the crux of it. But it's a little bit difficult legislatively for them to do right now. So this is one that we are watching closely.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you so
Still-
much.
Are
Go
we
ahead,
still going to
John.
discuss, are we still going to discuss the Padilla bill?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah. Why don't we transition to a
Yeah.
couple of follow-ups?
Do you want to start, Dave, or do you want me?
Well, your memo covered both the SB 473 and as well as CDO. So I'll just add my 2 cents worth so we can wrap the meeting by 10:30. So SB 473 was in front of the Energy or the Utilities and Energy Committee of the Assembly on July 16th, so 2 days before recess. Lori did speak on our behalf with an oppose. We filed a very lengthy letter with attachments supporting our position of opposing the bill. At the committee, it went through about 90 minutes of conversation, which is about 85 minutes more than conversation on the Senate side, where it just passed through quickly. So I think we're making progress there. And the whole nature of this bill is the investor-owned water utilities are attempting to reinstate their water revenue adjustment mechanism that they attempted to get through during the rate cases, last rate case. And in the current filed rate case that CalAm filed in July, they also are trying to reinstate the same water revenue adjustment mechanism. So they have a two-pronged approach. One is in the rate case and the other is this legislation. When the recess is over, it's likely, as the memo shows, it'll likely go to the Assembly Appropriations Committee, and we think it'll get put on the hold list. There is an economic impact. It's not greater than the governor's kind of stated red line, but nevertheless, there's, according to the PUC, an economic impact. So we will take our letter kind of revise it to move the economic impacts up to the front end of the letter, and we'll resubmit that to the Appropriations Committee prior to their hearing. Also, at the beginning of this year, we looked to do a fix to 2023 Assembly Bill 1572, which was sponsored by Friedman, and Lori and John worked with us with some committee folks, but ultimately in a conversation with,
Julia Hall.
Julia Hall of Aqua, thank you, their legislative person. She checked her notes and said, this was actually a little bit controversial, and the issue there is enforcement of the non-functional turf legislation, which got written into law, and it has certain due dates. In anticipation of that, we want to be the enforcement agent. And the way the legislation was written, only public water systems, cities, or counties can enforce. CalAm is the public water system here. They have no interest in enforcing this. And we thought, oh, well, why don't we just add urban water wholesalers, which is a defined term, which we are one of. And Julia said, no, there was a reason for this. The reason the legislation was drafted with notification to the public water system is that they didn't want too many enforcement agents. We said, well, that's kind of absurd because we're a special district and we are bigger than CalAm's service territory, but we have an interest in enforcing. So we went down a second path, which is an attempt to get a public water system ID number, which normally we would not have even contemplated because a public water system typically is the distributor of water to the retail customer. But it turns out the water code defines it, yes, as that, but also anybody who supplies water to a public water system prior to treatment, or anybody who has water treatment to treat water to serve another public water system. Well, we own the treatment facility at Aquifer Storage and Recovery, and we also store water in the ground for eventual delivery to Cal-Am through the Pure Water Monterey system. So, you know, words have meaning and laws are written certain ways, and we firmly believe that we are a public water system by definition. And so July 14th, we sent some examples of other public water systems who do have their ID number that look a lot like we do. And so we're about a week away of following up on that. And Michael, it may come to a legal notification as the next round, but we'll find out. We've been working with a state water board attorney who's assigned to the Division of Drinking Water. So through Lori's conversations, we decided not to pursue a legislative path. The easiest would have been to have the original sponsor just do a cleanup bill or throw it into an omnibus bill. But if there's any opposition whatsoever, it would have fallen out. And also the original sponsor became a congressman and is no longer in the assembly. So the legislative path is kind of dead. This regulatory path is live. Our local Division of Drinking Water person is not known to read language the way it's written, but kind of takes a liberal approach to things. So that's why I say it may come down to Michael issuing a more legalistic request, but we'll know probably at the end of this week if there's been any progress through the Division of Drinking Water. The only other thing I wanted to highlight on, and it was in JEA's memo, is that Don Addis, our assembly member, will be here August 23rd, which is a Saturday, and Mike and I and one of our fish people will be taking her out to the fish rearing facility, which I think fits strongly in her wheelhouse as an environmentalist. On the CDO, we originally had meetings scheduled for August 7th. Again, informal meetings, and the purpose of that was to tell the State Water Board members what the Public Utilities Commission decision means for our position that the CDO should be lifted. And then, as you well know, last Thursday, the Public Utilities Commission kicked that can down the road again to August 14th. So we've moved all of our meetings to August 21st. We have a meeting with the chair, Joaquin Esquivel, August 15th. And then we have another meeting with a member, Didi Diadamo, here in Carmel on August 25th. And then we have a check-in meeting with staff August 4th. But the key is to take what the PUC gives us and highlight what that means. And so we're starting to formulate kind of our last set of presentations before we do some formal filing of a petition to modify the order. A couple of things that we're going to raise to their attention are kind of it's a four-set process. We are not in violation. Cal-Am is not in violation, so there's no current violation. The PUC has given information that shows that there is no prospective or threatened violation. To not act administratively and address the CDO would be a violation of our due process rights, meaning we should be granted a hearing. If our contention is that there is no existing or threatened violation and they take no action and just leave the CDO in place, our position will be our due process rights are being violated. And then fourth, if they were to leave the cease and desist order in place, even if they did have a hearing, that our view is there may be a regulatory taking. And so we're going to feed some legalese in brief form to Michael for them to kind of round out those positions on due process and regulatory taking. But our informal meetings will signal to them that that's kind of our belief status, and that's what will be coming when we file in formally, which is now looking like it'll have to be September. And that's kind of all there is to talk about on the state level.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
So, yes, on the CDO, the people you're speaking with at the state board are aware of this pending. I mean, they were aware before you briefed them of this pending decision.
Very much so. And in
Yeah.
fact, early on when we started in January, they meaning the state water board staff, signaled to us that they didn't want to be the mediator over supply and demand numbers. And
Right.
if they had to be, their process would be much more lengthy. And so, you know, as you've heard me say before, if we had to live with the proposed decision the way it first came out, even though it was wrong, it would have supported our case. And so we're hopeful now that they don't backtrack on anything that was said in the proposed decision. And maybe they go further on the demand side and reduce demand numbers. But right now, that proposed decision would support lifting of the CDO. So, but it would sure make it a lot easier for us to say, hey, it's not us, it's not Cal-Am, you don't have to mediate our positions. This is the PUC's opinion. As wrong as it is, but we won't say that at that time.
Well, I still am hoping they correct at least the biggest errors, but yeah, I hear the pressure is great on the
Well, in the
PUC.
last Cal-Am presentation during their ex parte meetings, really attempted to throw aquifer storage and recovery under the bus. They had 2 slides on ASR saying, oh, it's totally unreliable, and you know, all that water could be gone in 3 years under a drought. And you know, they don't speak to the fact that prior to 2020, it was not operated in a manner that is intended to be operated. And now, so we're kind of like a little baby. We're just getting started with actual operation of ASR. And they showed some data all the way back to 2008. And it's like, well, the story behind that data is we only had 1 well until 2012. Then we had 2. Then we had 4. So you can't use this old data, but you know, they just flash it up there and you go, oh.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's why it'll be very helpful that our team is going to go and refute those, you know, because you know, if the last thing even though Cal-Am is repeating these arguments over and over and over again, I think it'll be really helpful to remind them of the counter arguments, and
yeah,
I'm glad you're doing that. Sorry, Lori, to sort of go down the rabbit hole of CPUC decisions.
Not at all.
But it is related.
Oh, absolutely. They're involved in some of the stuff that we're working on, especially with SB 473. So it's all relevant.
And
yeah, and we did compel Public Water Now to file a letter on SB 473 as well. So it's kind of like the 3 of us, the Public Advocate's Office, District, and Public Water Now are the only ones kind of advocating an opposed position. Mike did reach out to a couple of folks who spoke in support of the bill to try to get them off of their support. At least one of them didn't show up for the assembly meeting, so that may have had an impact, don't know.
Has anybody approached the nonprofit Turn? It's like the Rapier
the Utility
Advocate,
Reform Network.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't believe so. Dave?
Yeah.
I
know we
mean, they
asked
would, they
question.
probably are not in a position. I'm sorry?
No, I think we asked the question of Richard Rauschmeyer when we talked, but I don't recall what the answer was.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't put huge resource, probably not in a position to put a lot of resources, but they could support with, you know, letter at least, or something like that.
Water's not their thing, though. That's the truth, too bad.
Yeah, right. But ratepayers, it's the same ratepayers. And
Yeah,
it's
it's funny.
also the decoupling thing has, you know, it's, if it's just used as an excuse to protect the revenues and does nothing for conservation and efficiency, it's just a bad precedent too. Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, wonderful. We're trying to just keep the agenda moving, but those are things that Dave can definitely look into and think about for our next meeting. So wonderful questions. Are there any final thoughts, Dave, that you want us to concentrate or get out of this meeting here today?
No, I think you have a sense of the breadth of things that we're doing. So.
Yeah, I want to thank both federal and state lobbyists for good reports.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
very, very well done. Very, very good questions from all of the members, and the answers were fulfilling, right? They really laid it out, and I think they gave us a lot of information to move forward on. The next item is our next scheduled meeting. Dave, you have that written down somewhere?
No, we don't. So Sarah
Okay.
will distribute some possible dates, and
Yeah.
we'll see what sticks.
Okay. Anything else for a future agenda? And I think we just named one. Dave, you could just have an answer about that group's abilities to maybe weigh in on a letter, if you feel that's appropriate. Just put that
Yeah.
on there as an answer. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then we will close this meeting, and the next item will be adjournment.
All right. Hey, John Arriaga, stay on for a second.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Thanks to
Okay.
all of
Right.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So the lineup is, so Carmel is back. I mean, it's
And in fact, yeah, and they're back for several days.
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's things going on.
Yeah. So Wednesday is in the afternoon. It's the Aston Martin thing.
Yes.
Tuesday is kind of the equivalent of the old Concours on the Avenue.
Yeah, and in fact, that's what Dave and I and Janine and my wife got together, and we were talking about it. But we're looking at Tuesday at Enzo's.
Perfect.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Will you be bringing anybody?
I will extend that offer.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm going to get a hold of them and do something for lunch. We'll say, what's good for you? Noon, 1 o'clock?
Everything. I've kind of blocked it out. Let me make sure. Looking at the calendar here.
If I lose you, it's because my battery went dead.
Nope. Carmel car stuff is in my
Got
queue.
it.
So
All right.
either one is good. Assume there will be two of us, but I will. I'll firm that up and then text you.
Okay. Sounds good. All right,
All right,
Dave.
man.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.